Mr. Sablan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. In preparing for today's hearing, I read the editorial series in the Star Tribune that Ms. Burkham and that highlighted the very poor condition of BIA schools in Minnesota. The title of the series that struck me, Separate and Unequal. It is, of course, a reference to the milestone Supreme Court decision Brown versus Board of Education, which found that separate by definition cannot be equal when it comes to how we educate our children. So separating one group of children from another leads to inequality, perpetuates inequality. The situation of neglected and inadequate BIA school facilities, which GAO reported to us in Minnesota and elsewhere, Montana, North Dakota, New Mexico, proves that. We have school facilities in my district, the Northern Mariana Islands, and in other U.S. insular areas, 1,866, that are also substandard. The Office of Insular Affairs and Interior commissioned the Army Corps of Engineers a few years ago to rank these facilities by hazard posed to students. And since federal funding for school repairs in the areas have been allocated based on Army Corps rankings, of course, we could use more money to get the job done more quickly. I understand Chairman Klein and other members who represent Minnesota have requested more funding this year for BIE schools, and I hope they're successful, and I hope these funds are used in a systematic, prioritized way. I would like to point out another connection between BIE schools and schools in my district, and that is the way that Title I-A grants in elementary and secondary education acts are allocated. Funding for BIE students and students for what are called the outlying areas, the Northern Marianas, American Samoa, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, is separated out from all other Title A funding. BIE and the outlying schools receive 1% of the total Title I funds, and then the Secretary of Education decides how to divide that money between BIE and the island schools. And that system has resulted in BIE students getting about twice as much as students in my district. We're having a hearing today about how bad off BIE schools are, and they are when it comes to school buildings. But when it comes to federal funds to help run these schools, well, I have to speak up for students in my district who are getting the short end of the stick. The problem goes back to the headline in the Star Tribune, separate and unequal. When we separate one group of students from another, inequality arises, and that is the case with Title I funding. Instead of treating BIE students and students in the outlying areas the same way we treat students in the States, instead of basing fundings on the number of students served and on whether those students come from low-income households, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act has a set-aside. They call it For My Students. And set-aside is just another way of saying separate. And separate, as the Supreme Court ruled, is not equal. The House has yet to act on reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and I'm well aware that there's nothing in the bill that Chairman Klein has reported that would end this separate but unequal Title I-A funding for Native American children in the BIA schools and for the indigenous and diverse student body in schools in my district. But until the House acts on EACA, we still have an opportunity to change this unequal practice, and I plead on Chairman Klein to reconsider my proposal. And today's hearing is just one more opportunity to remind us all that until we do change Title I of EACA, we will continue to have students who are separate, not equal. And at this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield time to my colleague from Northern Minnesota, Mr. Nolan, who is a strong champion for this issue in Congress.
Gentleman's recognized.